Hello and welcome to the Face of Pro-Life. Today we'll be talking about the news of the day, and I will be speaking with Darlene Wagner. Thank you so much for joining us today, Darlene. Recently, there was some news in Connecticut about parental notification on abortion. I know for years they've been trying to get a hearing, just a hearing in one of the committees to address the issue that teens in the state of Connecticut do not need parental involvement at all in them obtaining an abortion. And we've been trying to protect our children by asking the legislator to even discuss parental notification on abortions. But something happened recently in the legislature. Could you just tell us a little bit about what happened with that issue?
Well, I think that it's very little, there was very little coverage on it, and it was defeated after, I think it was about 3 months of work on trying to get the parental notification to come forward. And it was defeated because it was included in a tanning bill, and because the forces, I guess, that were anti-life felt so strongly that that they didn't want to pass a parental notification law, that they thought that tanning was more important to have parental notification than it was to have parental notification for an abortion.
So they couldn't. We've never been able to get a parental notification for abortion bill out on the floor to vote, but through the committees, they did get out a bill that would require parental notification for a teen to go to a tanning salon.
Yes.
And so one of the legislators tried to amend that bill to add the parental notification for abortion, and the whole bill was defeated because of that.
Yes, the tanning bill and the parental notification together went down together.
So they were okay. They were set to pass a bill that would involve parental involvement with a teen going to get a tan, you know, for safety reasons. I mean, understandably, we don't want our kids getting skin cancer. Not that they can't go out in the sun and get a tan, but they totally refused to pass it just because abortion's just such a sacred cow. I mean, is that it?
I think that they really aren't thinking of the serious nature of what a surgical abortion is, or even an early abortion that's not a surgical abortion, that may be a morning after pill. I don't think that they realize the scope of it. In all seriousness, I think they're wearing blinders as to how important it is, one, that a parent have the knowledge of knowing that their daughter is having either an abortion that's a surgical abortion or an abortion because it's the morning after pill. In any case, it's a serious issue.
And it really is important. I mean, there are many states. There's over 20 states that have parental notification. Or even parental consent, meaning that the parent has to not only know about the child getting the abortion, but they also have to agree to it. But we've had several cases. One case of a girl, she was 17 and she took RU46, which is the abortion drug. She was at home. She passed out. She was unconscious. She was hemorrhaging. Her father did not know that she had had an abortion. They took her to the hospital. Therefore, she was unconscious. No, you know, the physicians didn't know she had had an abortion. By the time they figured out what was at issue, she had sepsis so bad that they couldn't save her, so she died. Now, had the father known, at least, you know, even if he was against her having the abortion pill, he could have at least been able to direct the doctors to let them know what was at issue. We've had the girl in Connecticut who had been abducted, and she was with this abductor for over a year. During that time, he had impregnated her, took her to Planned Parenthood, and had Planned Parenthood had to have notified her parents that she was having this abortion, they would have known, you know, where their daughter was. So you can see it's really to protect our children, and we are willing to protect them from UV rays, but not from the abortionist.
I think we need to revisit this next year in the General Assembly and start all over again and make it a separate issue. And I think that we need to have some political clout behind it. I think the problem is we don't have political clout. We evidently haven't exposed the issue in the way that it should be exposed, such as you're just talking about, the seriousness of this. And so we have a lot of work to do.
Right. And really the only way that it's going to be exposed in such a liberal state like this is if you talk to your family and friends about it, because you're not going to read about it in the newspaper. You really have to let people know what's going on. And that's the only way I can think of to mobilize people and have them hold their legislators accountable for this issue.
I think women need to start talking amongst themselves about this issue and the safety of women, young women, especially inexperienced young women. I don't really think that as you get older you realize how innocent young women are, how they haven't lived, they just haven't experienced life, and evidently our school system isn't giving them a well-rounded understanding of their own medical issues. I think it's very focused on just birth control, and I don't even think that they know when ovulation occurs or fertilization. They're just into pills. They're not into understanding their own biology. And that we really as women need to start reaching out to other women and talking to them about the impact of birth control pills and abortion and such a serious issue as having RU486 or any form of an abortion.
Right.
And
that we shouldn't be putting this wedge between parents and children.
Absolutely not.
You know, we really shouldn't, because they are the primary care providers of their children, and they really need to know and be involved in their child's health care.
I think the secondary effect of parental consent laws are the fact that we do not have one. And when we don't have one, and the neighboring state has one, we have 2,700 young women who come from another state to use Connecticut as a place to have abortions and escape from the parental consent laws of another state.
I mean, even Massachusetts has parental notification, and so women or girls from Massachusetts can come down to Connecticut and obtain abortions. You know, they even tried to pass a bill in on the federal level that would hold, say, the abortion clinics in Connecticut responsible, that you couldn't, you couldn't bypass the parental consent laws of another state by giving an abortion to a minor in a neighboring state. And of course that went down in flames.
When did that happen?
Years ago, I think during Clinton's era. Because even there was a girl in Pennsylvania, her boyfriend had gotten her pregnant, and his mom took her to New Jersey to obtain an abortion, and she almost died. So that they, it was basically kidnapping, taking a minor across state lines. It's crazy.
Well, then we should work to have parental consent laws in all the surrounding states. But for our state, we need to really have, I think, petition campaigns, sort of outreach to other women. So before next year, we have a lot of work to do.
No, that's a really good idea.
Consents.
That is a good idea. Unfortunately, with the proposition that went down to amend the Constitution, we don't have the right. We can petition, but it's not like we can petition to get it on a ballot or anything like that. But we still have the right to petition and get our legislators to hear our voices in that way. But that's a good idea. If everybody just went around and got names, signatures of people who really wanted, parental consent laws in the state.
Or to talk to women's groups.
Yeah.
To talk about the serious nature of some of the deaths that have occurred from young women who went home and bled to death and we really need to get their stories out there. And it seems to have touched every state. So I know Massachusetts seems to have had several stories that were pretty disastrous.
And what people don't understand too is that there are many studies out that indicate that girls who have abortions, especially in teenage years, and they're aborting obviously their first child, really increase their risk of getting breast cancer. And the women that have, or the girls who have family history of breast cancer, such as an aunt or a grandmother or mother, their chances of getting breast cancer after having an abortion statistically are exponential or infinity. Meaning every woman that got an abortion as a teenager and had family history got breast cancer.
Incredible.
So, I mean, these are things that not only do the girls need to discuss with their parents, the parents need to know. And because, if the parents, had all this information, then they would be better, suited to be able to help their children in the decision. Now, no one's saying, we would prefer that we wouldn't have legalized abortion at all. But be that as may, we would at least want the parents to be involved in the decision and know that their child is going into this dangerous situation.
What was our other news of the day?
Well, when you mentioned the idea of women not knowing their bodies and knowing when they're ovulating and when they're, so that when they're fertile, and that kind of reminded me of the morning after pill. Now, there are two different kinds of pills we talk about. We talk about RU-486, and that's an abortion pill. That's a pill that, it's actually a series of pills, 2 pills that a woman would take once she's pregnant that would terminate her pregnancy, kill her baby. The first pill is taken, and they're supposed to take it within, before the 8th week of pregnancy. The first pill they take basically kills the baby, starves the child. The second pill is a prostaglandin that causes severe contraction of the uterus so that the baby is expelled. That's a whole nother issue. The morning after pill is something that is really becoming popular, and it's very, very dangerous for young girls. And this is something that a girl would take right after having unprotected sex. And I know you had some research. You've done some research on that as far as the use of the morning after pill. What did you find?
Well, first I want to say that I didn't get upset about the morning after pill. I mean, it had disturbed me, but I thought it was exclusively going to be used in emergency rooms. I had bought the information that was out there that when certain hospitals, including Catholic hospitals, were being forced in the state of Connecticut to allow the morning after pill, that it was going to be exclusively being used as professionals for the purpose of rape and incest. Or
to
rape.
prevent the girl from getting pregnant.
Yes, that 24, 48 hours, and it was going to be used by a professional. I didn't approve of it, but it didn't alarm me. It didn't alarm me until I started to hear that it had become the contraceptive of choice on college campuses. And the trend, then I began to investigate, and I researched it in Australia and in England, and those are the countries that we have the mutual, ability to exchange information freely without because they speak English. And I saw that for the last 10 years that it had increasingly become a contraceptive of choice, that it had replaced contraceptives in general, and it was being used at 30%, 37% of the contraceptive market, and I was beginning to see a pattern, And when I was told by an admin at the universities that the contraceptives now, that the abortions were no longer being promoted on campus because the morning after pill was the pill of choice. It just opened a whole new idea that that abortions were being done so early that we were no longer going to have the serious, if you want to say, serious large baby to even view, to know that the girl was pregnant, where you could use an ultrasound and you could reveal. We're going to be having this trend that's setting in, and if it's like Europe, we'll have to change our emphasis. We'll have to return back to what makes a woman a woman. You're carrying life between the first 6 days of life. What happens at that time? We're going to have to return back to elementary, 5th and 6th grade education, to inform girls as to when life begins.
Well, that's the whole thing. I mean, the websites for there's at least 2 morning after pills. One is called Plan B, and one is called Ella. They're very similar in mechanism, but they're different in their formulation. And so the idea behind the morning after pill is to either prevent ovulation or to slow the progress of the egg if ovulation's already occurred down the fallopian tubes, and also to basically thicken the mucus in the cervix so that the sperm has a harder time getting to the egg. What unfortunately happens is, ideally the best time to take it, well, scientifically the best time to take it would be right before ovulation. So if you had unprotected sex right before you ovulated, you take the morning after pill. It prevents the egg from coming out. What happens is a girl doesn't know when she ovulates, and so she's taking it every time she has unprotected sex. Now, the makers specifically say you should only take this pill once per cycle. Okay, you should only really take it once a month. But girls are using this routinely, and what I found is on some of these blogs, or these question and answers, they've got women answering questions from these girls they're not experts, they're not doctors. They're saying, oh well, if you had unprotected sex one day, took the pill, and had unprotected sex the next day, you need to take another pill. So they're giving these girls advice to make sure that they, take the pill every time they have sex, and it's very dangerous because what the pill amounts to be is a super dose of birth control. And what it was intended to do was basically be an emergency, taken in an emergency, like if you forgot to take your birth control pill, or if the condom broke, those types of things. So it was meant to be an emergency contraception, but it's becoming, like you said, more routine, and it's very dangerous. And what makes it even more dangerous is that you can get it over the counter without a prescription.
Well, it was meant to be in the case of rape. It was meant to be
well, that's
used
how they
in a
introduce
hospital
it.
setting, but it turned into a consumer item,
Right.
that is now sort of, I would say, out of control.
It is. It really is. And there's no way to track it. And they were very upset because women 17 and older can get this pill without any prescription, like we said. But somebody 16 and under has to have a prescription.
Well, 17.
Oh, 17 and under. Now, the problem with that is that, in that case, the manufacturer is only covering their butts because it has not been tested in adolescents. Hasn't been you cannot put a drug on a market for an adolescent group, especially over the counter, without having been tested in that group. for safety concerns. And it hasn't been tested, so that's why, they have to have a prescription. So what the girls are doing is they go to their OBGYN and have the prescription. So in case they have unprotected sex, they can run to the pharmacy and get it. Because you need to get it right away. You have to take it within 72 hours, and the closer you take it to the time, that you made a mistake, the more effective it's going to be.
What are some of the after effects?
Well, like most drugs, you get nausea, maybe dizziness, maybe vomiting. Oh, and of course, if you vomit, they suggest that within 2 hours, they suggest that you take another dose, just because you might not have absorbed enough of the drug to make it effective. But I think the worst problem, the most dangerous problem, is because it slows the progress of the egg down the fallopian tube, and it makes the uterus inhospitable for the egg to implant. If it does get fertilized, we get a lot of ectopic pregnancies. So if the egg does happen to get fertilized, and the baby will implant in the fallopian tubes rather than in the inhospitable uterus. And so there's a very high risk of ectopic pregnancy, which is very, very dangerous. And of course, a girl thinks she took this morning after pill, she's not going to be pregnant, and you can die if your fallopian tube ruptures.
It doesn't seem like it's making it any easier. It seems like it's complicating everything, and certainly is causing more and more early abortions.
Right. Like I said, the manufacturers claim that they do not cause abortions, and yet they also claim that one of the risk factors is ectopic pregnancy. So if you have an ectopic pregnancy, you necessarily have to have an abortion, Or if maybe the egg got all the way through the tube and just flushed out because it couldn't implant in the uterus because it was and that's an abortion.
Absolutely, and that comes back to our basic 5th and 6th grade biology. And that's where we have to return to, so that they can understand the responsibility that they have to themselves and to their ability to have children in the future, that they need to really rethink this, because we have no idea as to what the long-range effects that this could be on their fertility, their health. We have no idea. We
really don't. And I know they claim that, out of the thousands, 3 or 5 or 7, I don't know, I can't remember how many thousands of people they tested on the one test, there were 200 pregnancies. Okay? So these girls aren't always taking it right when they're ovulating.
8,400 women and 267 of them became pregnant.
So you figure of those 8,000 women, not all of them would even be taking it when they were fertile. Okay, so if all of them were taking it when they were fertile, how many more pregnancies would they have had?
I think it's a carelessness of the idea that it's a super pill for them. And that's the serious part of this discussion, is that it's become as easy as apple pie, but it's not.
No, just take an aspirin and call me in the morning.
It's very, very serious medicine, and serious in terms of the death of it will be creating at least, if we set at least, let's say 1 in 8 would be a pregnancy, and if there were 2 to 3 million morning after pills, that would be a tremendous number of abortions that are taking place.
And those are the ones that we don't know.
That we're just going at the low end. We're not going at the high end.
And then the ones that did get pregnant after taking the morning after pill, because I don't know if you've seen it at Birthright, but I know at Problem Pregnancy, many of the girls come in and they're pregnant and they don't understand because they took the morning after pill. And we see that often.
Well, I understand from other pregnancy crisis centers that they're getting more and more of the girls coming in, either having taken the morning after pill and their menstrual cycle becomes very irregular.
That's true too.
And so it leaves them in an ambiguous state where they no longer can actually know whether or not they're pregnant or they're not pregnant. They're just they're bleeding slightly or profusely or not at all. So it really does mess up the cycles for young women. It's totally bad medicine. There's absolutely nothing good that's going to come of this. And that brings us, and I think we probably are running out of time, but that would bring us to our third story, and that was on the new super strain of gonorrhea.
Oh, Lord.
And so we'll talk about that in our next show.
So
What he said.
we have just a couple minutes. We can talk about it, but apparently in Japan, where many of the new strains of gonorrhea appear, they've found a superbug, meaning that the current medications for treating gonorrhea are ineffective.
Well, of course, I found this on the internet, and it is whenever you find that an antibiotic no longer is useful, the best antibiotics no longer work for gonorrhea. That means that if for some reason it should enter this country, it would be
Untreatable.
Yeah, untreatable. And so when you take the morning after pill, all the reports are coming out that the morning after pill is a vicarious lifestyle. That usually it's because women think that they can always use a morning after pill, and they don't. They do not use the other traditional methods of protection.
Right.
So therefore, if the super strain of gonorrhea is coming, and you have this vicarious lifestyles, then you put them together, you could have a major outbreak of an epidemic of venereal disease. And so that's something that the young women who use the morning after pill need to really take in consideration.
Yeah, because none of the pills, none of the birth control, actually none of the birth control methods protect women from venereal diseases.
And this would be very serious. This would be untreatable.
And
or if it would be, they would have to find a new antibiotic to defeat this gonorrhea. I mean, they say all the traditional best antibiotics are not working on it.
And that's really scary because that is really, it has a very bad effect on women, especially infertility and ectopic pregnancies. I mean, it does cause a lot of problems. And we thought, it used to be that we only had a couple of venereal diseases and they were treatable because they were bacterial infections. And now we have over 30, and they're all viral infections, which are not treatable in any way.
Let's end on a good note. We want women to stay away from both the morning after pill and any possibilities of anything
extramarital sex.
Yes.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Thank you for joining us today. We hope that you've learned something. Put together a petition. We would really like to get a bill into our legislature this coming session regarding the parental notification for abortion. And when you look in the mirror the next time, you realize yours too is the face of pro-life. Please join us again for our next show.